Loki.
In Norse mythology, Loki, Loptr, or Hvedrungr is a god or Jotun. Loki is the son of Fauborti and Laufey, and the brother of Helblindi and Bilis. By the Jotun Angbida, Loki is the father of Hel, the Wolfina, and the world serpent Jormungand. By his wife Sigyn, Loki is the father of Nafi and Ornari. By the stallion Svadilfari, Loki is the mother, giving birth in the form of a mare, to the eight-legged horse Sleipnir. In addition, Loki is referred to as the father of Vali in the Prose Edda. Loki's relation with the gods varies by source. Loki sometimes assists the gods and sometimes causes problems for them. Loki is a shapeshifter, and in separate incidents he appears in the form of a salmon, mare, seal, a fly, and possibly an elderly woman. Loki's positive relations with the gods end with his role in engineering the death of the god Baldr. Loki is eventually bound by the gods with the entrails of one of his sons. In both the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, the goddess Skadi is responsible for placing a serpent above him while he is bound. The serpent drips venom from above him that Sigyn collects into a bowl. However, she must empty the bowl when it is full, and the venom that drips in the meantime causes Loki to writhe in pain, thereby causing earthquakes. With the onset of Ragnarok, Loki is foretold to slip free from his bonds and to fight against the gods among the forces of the Jotnar, at which time he will encounter the god Heimdall and the two will slay each other. Loki is referred to in the Poetic Edda, compiled in the 13th century from earlier traditional sources. The Prose Edda and Heimskringla, written in the 13th century by Snorri Sturluson. The Norwegian rune poems, in the poetry of skalds, and in Scandinavian folklore. Loki may be depicted on the Snaptun stone, the Kirkby Stephen stone, and the Gosforth cross. Loki's origins and role in Norse mythology, which some scholars have described as that of a trickster god, have been much debated by scholars.
Names.
The etymology of the name Loki has yet to be solved. It may be related to Old Norse Luka, meaning close, potentially pointing to Loki's role at Ragnarok. In various poems from the Poetic Edda, stanza 2 of Lokasenna, stanza 41 of Hyndluljóð, and stanza 26 of Älfsvinnsmál, and sections of the Prose Edda, chapter 32 of Gylfaginning, stanza 8 of Horstlong, and stanza 1 of Forstrapa, Loki is alternately referred to as Loptr, which is generally considered derived from Old Norse lop meaning air, and therefore points to an association with the air. The name Hvedrung, Old Norse Ror is also used in reference to Loki, occurring in names for hell, such as in Ynglingatal, Hvedrungsmere, and in reference to Fina, as in Voluspa.
Attestations. Poetic Edda.
In the Poetic Edda, Loki appears, or is referenced, in the poems Voluspa, Lokasenna, Thrimskvda, Reginsmal, Baldrs Trauma, and Hyndluljóð.
Voluspa.
In stanza 35 of the Poetic Edda poem Voluspa, Volva tells Odin that, among many other things, she sees Sigyn sitting very unhappily with her bound husband, Loki, under a grove of hot springs. In stanza 51, during the events of Ragnarok, Loki appears free from his bonds and is referred to as the brother of Bilis, here transcribed as Biliist. In stanza 54, after consuming Odin and being killed by Odin's son Vidar, Fina is described as Loki's kinsman.
Lokasenna.
The poem Lokasenna, Old Norse Loki's quarrel centers around Loki flirting with other gods. Loki puts forth two stanzas of insults while the receiving figure responds with a single stanza, and then another figure chimes in. The poem begins with a prose introduction detailing that Oegr, a figure associated with the sea, is hosting a feast in his hall for a number of the gods and elves. There, the gods praise Oegr's servers Fimafeng and Eldir. Loki could not bear to hear that, and kills the servant Fimafeng. In response, the gods grab their shields, shrieking at Loki, and chase him out of the hall and to the woods. The gods then return to the hall, and continue drinking. Loki comes out of the woods, and meets Eldir outside of the hall. Loki greets Eldir, and the poem itself begins, with a demand that Eldir tell him what the gods are discussing over their ale inside the hall. Eldir responds that they discuss their weapons and their prowess in war, and yet no one there has anything friendly to say about Loki. Loki says that he will go into the feast, and that, before the end of the feast, he will induce quarreling among the gods, and mix their mead with malice. Eldir responds that if shouting and fighting you pour out onto the gods, they'll wipe it off on you. Loki then enters the hall, and everyone there falls silent upon noticing him. Breaking the silence, Loki says that, thirsty, he had come to these halls from a long way away to ask the gods for a drink of the famous mead. Calling the gods arrogant, Loki asks why they are unable to speak, and demands that they assign him a seat and a place for him at the feast, or tell him to leave. The Skaldic god Bragi is the first to respond to Loki by telling him that Loki will not have a seat and place assigned to him by the gods at the feast, for the gods know what men they should invite. Loki does not respond to Bragi directly, but instead directs his attention to Odin, and states. Odin then asks his silent son Vidar to sit up, so that Loki, here referred to as the wolf's father, may sit at the feast, and so that he may not speak words of blame to the gods in Oego's hall. Vidar stands and pours a drink for Loki. Prior to drinking, Loki declaims a toast to the gods, with a specific exception for Bragi. Bragi responds that he will give a horse, sword, and ring from his possessions so that he does not repay the gods with hatred. Loki responds that Bragi will always be short of all of these things, accusing him of being wary of war, and shy of shooting. Bragi responds that, were they outside of Oego's hall, Bragi would be holding Loki's head as a reward for his lies. Loki replies that Bragi is brave when seated, calling him a bench ornament, and that Bragi would run away when troubled by an angry, spirited man. The goddess Idun interrupts, asking Bragi, as a service to his relatives and adopted relatives, not to say words of blame to Loki in Oego's hall. Loki tells Idun to be silent, calling her the most man-crazed of all women, and saying that she placed her washed, bright arms around her brother's slayer. Idun says that she won't say words of blame in Oego's hall, and affirms that she quietened Bragi, who was made talkative by beer, and that she doesn't want the two of them to fight. The goddess Gefjun asks why the two gods must fight, saying that Loki knows that he is joking, and that all living things love him. Loki responds to Gefjun by stating that Gefjun's heart was once seduced by a white boy, who gave her a jewel, and who Gefjun laid her thigh over. Odin says that Loki must be insane to make Gefjun his enemy, as her wisdom about the fates of men may equal Odin's own. Loki says that Odin does a poor job in handing out honor in war to men, and that he's often given victory to the faint-hearted. Odin responds that even if this is true, Loki, in a story otherwise unattested, once spent 8 winters beneath the earth as a woman milking cows, and during this time bore children. Odin declares this perverse. Loki counters that Odin once practiced Seid on the island of Samsey, now Samso, Denmark, and, appearing as a wizard, traveled among mankind, which Loki condemns as perverse. Frigg, a major goddess and Odin's wife, says that what Loki and Odin did in the ancient past should not be spoken of in front of others, and that ancient matters should always remain hidden. Loki brings up that Frigg is the daughter of Orgin, a personification of the earth, and that she had once taken Odin's brothers Vili and Ve into her embrace. Frigg responds that if there was a boy like her now deceased son Baldur in the hall, Loki would not be able to escape from the wrath of the gods. Loki reminds Frigg that he is responsible for the death of her son Baldur. The goddess Freyja declares that Loki must be mad, stating that Frigg knows all fate, yet she does not speak it. Loki claims each of the gods and elves that are present have been Freyja's lover. Freyja replies that Loki is lying, that he just wants to yelp about wicked things, that gods and goddesses are furious with him, and that he will go home thwarted. In response, Loki calls Freyja a malicious witch, and claims that Freyja was once astride her brother Freyr. When all of the other laughing gods surprised her, Freyja then farted. this scenario is otherwise unattested. Njordr, Frasier and Freya's father, says that it is harmless for a woman to have a lover or someone else beside her husband, and that what is surprising is a pervert god coming here who has borne children. Loki tells Njordr to be silent, recalling Njordr's status as once having been a hostage from the Vanir to the Aesir during the Aesir-Vanir War, that the daughters of Hymir once used Njordr as a piss pot, urinating in his mouth, an otherwise unattested comment. Njordr responds that this was his reward when he was sent as a hostage to the Aesir, and that he fathered his son, Freyr, whom no one hates, and is considered a prince of the Aesir. Loki tells Njordr to maintain his moderation, and that he won't keep it secret any longer that Njordr fathered this son with his sister, unnamed, although one would expect him to be worse than he turned out. The god defends Freyr, to which Loki replies that he should be silent, for he cannot deal straight with people, and points out that it was Loki's son, the wolf Fenrir, who tore his hand off. According to the prose introduction to the poem, Tyr is now one-handed from having his arm bitten off by Loki's son Fenrir while Fenrir was bound. Tyr responds that while he may have lost a hand, Loki has lost the wolf, and trouble has come to them both. Further, that Fenrir must now wait in shackles until the onset of Ragnarok. Loki tells Tyr to be silent a second time, and states that his wife, otherwise unattested, had a son by Loki, and that Tyr never received any compensation for this injury, further calling him a wretch. Freyr himself interrupts at this point, and says that he sees a wolf lying before a river mouth, and that, unless Loki is immediately silent, like the wolf, Loki shall also be bound until Ragnarok. Loki retorts that Freyr purchased his consort Gjordr with gold, having given away his sword, which he will lack at Ragnarok. Bigva, referred to in the prose introduction to the poem as a servant of Freyr, says that if he had as noble a lineage and as an honorable a seat as Freyr, he would grind down Loki, and make all of his limbs lame. Loki refers to Bigva in terms of a dog, and says that Bigva is always found at Freyr's ears, or twittering beneath a grindstone. Bigva says that he's proud to be here by all the gods and men, and that he's said to be speedy. Loki tells him to be silent, that Bigva does not know how to apportion food among men, and that he hides among the straw and dais when men go to battle. The god Heimdall says that Loki is drunk and witless, and asks Loki why he won't stop speaking. Loki tells Heimdall to be silent, that he was fated a hateful life, that Heimdall must always have a muddy back, and serve as watchman of the gods. The goddess Skadi says that while Loki now appears light-hearted and playing with his tail wagging, he will soon be bound with his ice-cold son's guts on a sharp rock by the gods. Loki says that, even if this is his fate, that he was first and foremost with the other gods at the killing of Skadi's father, Thjazi. Skadi says that, with these events in mind, baneful advice will always come from her sanctuaries and plains to Loki. Loki says that Skadi was once gentler in speech to him, referring to himself as the son of Laufey when Skadi once invited him to her bed, an event that is unattested elsewhere, and that such events must be mentioned if they are to recall shameful deeds. Sif, wife of Thor, goes forth and pours Loki a glass of mead into a crystal cup in a prose narrative. Continuing the poem, Sif welcomes Loki and invites him to take a crystal cup filled with ancient mead, and says that among the children of the Aesir, she is singularly blameless. Loki takes the horn, drinks it, and says that she would be, if it were so, and states that Sif had a lover beside Thor, namely, Loki himself, an event that is otherwise unattested. Bela, referred to in the prose introduction to the poem as a servant of Freyr, says that all of the mountains are shaking, that she thinks Thor must be on his way home, and when Thor arrives he will bring peace to those that quarrel there. Loki tells Bela to be silent, that she is much imbued with malice, that no worse female has ever been among the Aesir's children, and calling her a bad serving wench. Thor arrives, and tells Loki to be silent, referring to him as an evil creature, stating that with his hammer Mjolnir he will silence Loki by hammering his head from his shoulders. Acknowledging that Thor has arrived, Loki asks Thor why he is raging, and says that Thor won't be so bold to fight against the wolf when he swallows Odin at Ragnarok. Thor again tells Loki to be silent, and threatens him with Mjolnir, adding that he will throw Loki up on the roads to the east, and thereafter no one will be able to see Loki. Loki states that Thor should never brag of his journeys to the east, claiming that there Thor crouched cowering in the thumb of a glove, mockingly referring to him as a hero, and adding that such behavior was unlike Thor. Thor responds by telling Loki to be silent, threatening him with Mjolnir, and adding that every one of Loki's bones will be broken with it. Loki says he intends to live for a long while yet despite Thor's threats, and taunts Thor about an encounter Thor once had with the Skrimir, Utgarda Loki in disguise. Thor again commands Loki to be silent, threatens Loki with Mjolnir, and says he will send Loki to hell, below the gates of Nigrind. In response to Thor, Loki says that he spoke before the Aesir, and before the sons of the Aesir, what his spirit urged him to say, yet before Thor alone he will leave, as he knows that Thor does strike. Loki ends the poetic verses of Lokasenna with a final stanza. Following this final stanza, a prose section details that after Loki left the hall, he disguised himself as a salmon and hid in the waterfall of Frananxfors, where the Aesir caught him. The narrative continues that Loki was bound with the entrails of his son Nari, and his son Nafi changed into a wolf. Skadi fastened a venomous snake over Loki's face, and from it poison dripped. Sigyn, Loki's wife, sat with him holding a basin beneath the dripping venom, yet when the basin became full, she carried the poison away. And during this time the poison dripped onto Loki, causing him to writhe with such violence that all of the earth shook from the force, resulting in what are now known as earthquakes.
Thrymskvida.
In the poem Thrymskvida, Thor wakes and finds that his powerful hammer, Mjolnir, is missing. Thor turns to Loki first, and tells him that nobody knows that the hammer has been stolen. The two then go to the court of the goddess Freyja, and Thor asks her if he may borrow her feather cloak so that he may attempt to find Mjolnir. Freyja agrees, saying she'd lend it even if it were made of silver and gold, and Loki flies off, the feather cloak whistling. In Jotunheim, the Jotun Thrym sits on a burial mound, plaiting golden collars for his female dogs, and trimming the manes of his horses. Thrym sees Loki, and asks what could be amiss among the Aesir and the elves. Why is Loki alone in the Jotunheim? Loki responds that he has bad news for both the elves and the Aesir, that Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, is gone. Thrym says that he has hidden Mjolnir 8 leagues beneath the earth, from which it will be retrieved, if Freyja is brought to him as his wife. Loki flies off, the feather cloak whistling, away from Jotunheim and back to the court of the gods. Thor asks Loki if his efforts were successful, and that Loki should tell him while he's still in the air, as tales often escape a sitting man, and the man lying down often barks out lies. Loki states that it was indeed an effort, and also a success, for he has discovered that Thrym has the hammer, but that it cannot be retrieved unless Freyja is brought to Thrym as his wife. The two return to Freyja, and tell her to dress herself in a bridal headdress, as they will drive her to Jotunheim. Freyja, indignant and angry, goes into a rage, causing all of the halls of the Aesir to tremble in her anger, and her necklace, the famed Bsingaman, falls from her. Freyja pointedly refuses. As a result, the gods and goddesses meet and hold a thing to discuss and debate the matter. At the thing, the god Heimdall puts forth the suggestion that, in place of Freyja, Thor should be dressed as the bride, complete with jewels, women's clothing down to his knees, a bridal headdress, and the necklace Bsingaman. Thor rejects the idea, and Loki, here described as son of Laufey, interjects that this will be the only way to get back Mjolnir, and points out that without Mjolnir, the Jotnar will be able to invade and settle in Asgard. The gods dress Thor as a bride, and Loki states that he will go with Thor as his maid, and that the two shall drive to Jotunheim together. After riding together in Thor's goat-driven chariot, the two, disguised, arrive in Jotunheim. Thrym commands the Jotnar in his hall to spread straw on the benches, for Freyja has arrived to be his wife. Thrym recounts his treasured animals and objects, stating that Freyja was all that he was missing in his wealth. Early in the evening, the disguised Loki and Thor meet with the Thrym and the assembled Jotnar. Thor eats and drinks ferociously, consuming entire animals and 3 casks of mead. Thrym finds the behavior at odds with his impression of Freyja, and Loki, sitting before Thrym and appearing as a very shrewd maid, makes the excuse that Freyja's behavior is due to her having not consumed anything for 8 entire days before arriving due to her eagerness to arrive. Thrym then lifts Freyja's veil and wants to kiss her until catching the terrifying eyes staring back at him, seemingly burning with fire. Loki states that this is because Freyja had not slept for 8 nights in her eagerness. The wretched sister of the Jotnar appears, asks for a bridal gift from Freyja, and the Jotnar bring out Mjolnir to sanctify the bride, to lay it on her lap, and marry the two by the hand of the goddess Thor. Thor laughs internally when he sees the hammer, takes hold of it, strikes Thrym, beats all of the Jotnar, and kills the older sister of the Jotnar.
Reginsmal.
Loki appears in both prose and the first 6 stanzas of the poem Reginsmal. The prose introduction to Reginsmal details that, while the hero Sigurd was being fostered by Regin, son of Redma, Regin tells him that once the gods Odin, Hrungnir, and Loki went to Andvra Falls, which contained many fish. Regin, a dwarf, had 2 brothers. Andvari, who gained food by spending time in the Andvra Falls in the form of a pike, and Ot, who would often go to the Andvra Falls in the form of an otter. While the 3 gods are at the falls, Ot, in the form of an otter, catches a salmon and eats it on a river bank, his eyes shut, when Loki hits and kills him with a stone. The gods think that this is great, and flay the skin from the otter to make a bag. That night, the 3 gods stay with Redma, the father of Regin, Andvari, and the now dead Ot, and show him their catches, including the skin of the otter. Upon seeing the skin, Regin and Redma seized them and made them ransom their lives in exchange for filling the otter skin bag the gods had made with gold and covering the exterior of the bag with red gold. Loki is sent to retrieve the gold, and Loki goes to the goddess Ran, borrows her net, and then goes back to the Andvra Falls. At the falls, Loki spreads his net before Andvari, who is in the form of a pike, which Andvari jumps into. The stanzas of the poem then begin. Loki mocks Andvari, and tells him that he can save his head by telling Loki where his gold is. Andvari gives some background information about himself, including that he was cursed by a Norn of misfortune in his early days. Loki responds by asking Andvari, what requital does mankind get if they wound each other with words? Andvari responds that lying men receive the terrible requital having to wade in the river Vajamir, and that their suffering will be long. Loki looks over the gold that Andvari possesses, and after Andvari hands over all of his gold, Andvari holds on to but a single ring. The ring Andvarinort, which Loki also takes. Andvari, now in the form of a dwarf, goes into a rock, and tells Loki that the gold will result in the death of 2 brothers, will cause strife between 8 princes, and will be useless to everyone. Loki returns, and the 3 gods give Redma the money from the gold hoard and flatten out the otter skin, stretch out its legs, and heap gold atop it, covering it. Redma looks it over, and notices a single hair that has not been covered. Redma demands that it be covered as well. Odin puts forth the ring Andvarinort, covering the single hair. Loki states that they have now handed over the gold, and that gold is cursed as Andvari is, and that it will be the death of Redma and Regin both. Redma responds that if he had known this before, he would have taken their lives, yet that he believes those are not yet born whom the curse is intended for, and that he doesn't believe him. Further, with the hoard, he will have red gold for the rest of his life. Redma tells them to leave, and the poem continues without further mention of Loki.
Baldr's Dromer.
In Baldr Drama, Odin has awoken a deceased Volva in Hell, and questions her repeatedly about his son Baldr's bad dreams. Loki is mentioned in stanza 14, the final stanza of the poem, where the Volva tells Odin to ride home, to be proud of himself, and that no one else will come visit until Loki is loose, escaped from his bonds, and the onset of Ragnarok.
Hyndla Oljud.
Loki is referenced in 2 stanzas in Veluspain Scammer, found within the poem Hindluljod. The first stanza notes that Loki produced the wolf with the Jotun Angbida, that Loki himself gave birth to the horse Sleipnir by the stallion Svadilfari, and that Loki, referred to as the brother of Beliais, thirdly gave birth to the worst of all marvels. This stanza is followed by. In the second of the 2 stanzas, Loki is referred to as Lopt. Loki's consumption of a woman's heart is otherwise unattested.
Jolsvinsmal.
In the poem Ulsvinsmal, a stanza mentions Loki, as Lopt, in association with runes. In the poem, Ulsvide describes to the hero Svipate that Sinmara keeps the weapon Levatian within a chest, locked with 9 strong locks. Due to significant translation differences, 2 translations of the stanza are provided here.
Prose Edda. Gylfaginning.
The Prose Edda book Gylfaginning tells various myths featuring Loki, including Loki's role in the birth of the horse Sleipnir and Loki's contest with Loki, fire personified. Loki first appears in the Prose Edda in chapter 20 of the book Gylfaginning, where he is referred to as the as-called Loki, while the enthroned figure of Third explains to Gangleri, King Alfie in disguise, the goddess Frigg's prophetic abilities while citing a stanza of Lokasenna. Loki is more formally introduced by High in chapter 34, where he is reckoned among the Aesir, and High states that Loki is called by some the Aesir's calumniator, originator of deceits, and the disgrace of all gods and men. High says that Loki's alternative name is Lopt, that he is the son of the male Jotun Farborti, his mother is Laufey or Null, and his brothers are Helblindi and Beliais. High describes Loki as pleasing and handsome in appearance, malicious in character, very capricious in behavior, and as possessing to a greater degree than others learn cunning, and tricks for every purpose, often getting the Aesir into trouble, and then getting them out of it with his trickery. Loki's wife is named Sigyn, and they have a son named Nari or Nafi. Otherwise, Loki had 3 children with a female Jotun Angbida from Jotunheim. The Wolfina, the serpent Jormungand, and the female being Hel. The gods realized that these 3 children were being raised in Jotunheim, and expected trouble from them partially due to the nature of Angbida, but worse yet Loki. In chapter 35, Gangleri comments that Loki produced a pretty terrible, yet important, family. In chapter 42, High tells a story set right at the beginning of the gods' settlement, when the gods had established Midgard and built Valhall. The story is about an unnamed builder who has offered to build a fortification for the gods that will keep out invaders in exchange for the goddess Freyja, the sun, and the moon. After some debate, the gods agree to these conditions, but place a number of restrictions on the builder, including that he must complete the work within 3 seasons without the help of any man. The builder makes a single request. That he may have help from his stallion Svadilfari, and due to Loki's influence, this is allowed. The stallion Svadilfari performs twice the deeds of strength as the builder, and hauls enormous rocks, to the surprise of the gods. The builder, with Svadilfari, makes fast progress on the wall, and 3 days before the deadline of summer, the builder is nearly at the entrance to the fortification. The gods convene, and figure out who is responsible, resulting in a unanimous agreement that, along with most trouble, Loki is to blame, here referred to as Loki Laufeyjarson, his surname derived from his mother's name, Laufey. The gods declare that Loki deserves a horrible death if he cannot find a scheme that will cause the builder to forfeit his payment, and threaten to attack him. Loki, afraid, swears oaths that he will devise a scheme to cause the builder to forfeit the payment, whatever it may cost himself. That night, the builder drives out to fetch stone with his stallion Svadilfari, and out from a wood runs a mare. The mare neighs at Svadilfari, and realizing what kind of horse it was, Svadilfari becomes frantic, neighs, tears apart his tackle, and runs towards the mare. The mare runs to the wood, Svadilfari follows, and the builder chases after. The 2 horses run around all night, causing the building to be halted, and the builder is then unable to regain the previous momentum of his work. The builder goes into a rage, and when the Aesir realize that the builder is a Rhymethes, They disregard their previous oaths with the builder, and call for Thor. Thor arrives, and subsequently kills the builder by smashing the builder's skull into shards with the hammer Mjolnir. However, Loki had such dealings with Svadilfari that somewhat later Loki gives birth to a grey foal with 8 legs. The horse Sleipnir, the best horse among gods and men. In chapter 44, Third reluctantly relates a tale where Thor and Loki are riding in Thor's chariot, which is pulled by his 2 goats. Loki and Thor stop at the house of a peasant farmer, and there they are given lodging for a night. Thor slaughters his goats, prepares them, puts them in a pot, and Loki and Thor sit down for their evening meal. Thor invites the peasant family who own the farm to share with him the meal he has prepared. Afterward, the peasant child Thjolfi sucks the bone marrow from one of the goat bones, and when Thor goes to resurrect the goats, he finds one of the goats to be lame. In their terror, the family atones to Thor by giving Thor their son Thjolfi and their daughter Roskva. Minus the goats, Thor, Loki, and the 2 children continue east until they arrive at a vast forest in Jotunheim. They continue through the woods until dark. The 4 seek shelter for the night. They encounter an immense building. Finding shelter in a side room, they experience earthquakes through the night. The earthquakes cause all 4 but Thor, who grips his hammer in preparation of defense, to be fearful. The building turns out to be the huge glove of Skrymir, who has been snoring throughout the night, causing what seem to be earthquakes. All 4 sleep beneath an oak tree near Skrymir in fear. Thor wakes up in the middle of the night, and a series of events occur where Thor twice attempts to kill the sleeping Skrymir with his hammer. Skrymir awakes after each attempt, only to say that he detected an acorn falling on his head or that he wonders if bits of tree from the branches above have fallen on top of him. The second attempt awakes Skrymir. Skrymir gives them advice. If they are going to be cocky at the keep of Utgard, it would be better for them to turn back now, for Utgard Loki's men won't put up with it. Skrymir throws his knapsack onto his back and abruptly goes into the forest. High comments that there is no report that the Aesir expressed hope for a happy reunion. The 4 travelers continue their journey until midday. They find themselves facing a massive castle in an open area. The castle is so tall that they must bend their heads back to their spines to see above it. At the entrance to the castle is a shut gate, and Thor finds that he cannot open it. Struggling, all 4 squeeze through the bars of the gate, and continue to a large hall. Inside the great hall are 2 benches, where many generally large people sit on 2 benches. The 4 see Utgard Loki, the king of the castle, sitting. Utgard Loki says that no visitors are allowed to stay unless they can perform a feat. Loki, standing in the rear of the party, is the first to speak, claiming that he can eat faster than anyone. Utgard Loki comments that this would be a feat indeed, and calls for a being by the name of Loki to come from the benches. A trencher is fetched, placed on the floor of the hall, and filled with meat. Loki and Loki sit down on opposing sides. The 2 eat as quickly as they can and meet at the midpoint of the trencher. Loki consumed all of the meat off of the bones on his side, yet Loki had not only consumed his meat, but also the bones in the trencher itself. It was evident to all that Loki had lost. In turn, Thjolfi races against a figure by the name of Hugi 3 times and thrice loses. Thor agrees to compete in a drinking contest but after 3 immense gulps fails. Thor agrees to lift a large, grey cat in the hall but finds that it arches his back no matter what he does, and that he can only raise a single paw. Thor demands to fight someone in the hall, but the inhabitants say doing so would be demeaning, considering Thor's weakness. Utgard Loki then calls for his nurse Ellie, an old woman. The 2 wrestle but the harder Thor struggles the more difficult the battle becomes. Thor is finally brought down to a single knee. Utgard Loki says to Thor that fighting anyone else would be pointless. Now late at night, Utgard Loki showed the group to their rooms and they are treated with hospitality. The next morning the group gets dressed and prepares to leave the keep. Utgard Loki appears, has his servants prepare a table, and they all merrily eat and drink. As they leave, Utgarda Loki asks Thor how he thought he fared in the contests. Thor says that he is unable to say he did well, noting that he is particularly annoyed that Utgarda Loki will now speak negatively about him. Utgarda Loki points out that the group has left his keep and says that he hopes that they never return to it, for if he had an inkling of what he was dealing with he would never have allowed the group to enter in the first place. Utgarda Loki reveals that all was not what it seemed to the group. Utgarda Loki was in fact the immense Skrimir, and that if the 3 blows Thor attempted to land had hit their mark, the first would have killed Skrimir. In reality, Thor's blows were so powerful that they had resulted in 3 square valleys. The contests too, were an illusion. Utgarda Loki reveals that Loki had actually competed against Wildfire itself, Logi, Old Norse Flame, Thjolfi had raced against Thought, Hugi, Old Norse Thought. Thor's drinking horn had actually reached to the ocean and with his drinks he lowered the ocean level, resulting in tides. The cat that Thor attempted to lift was in actuality the world's serpent, Jormungand, and everyone was terrified when Thor was able to lift the paw of this cat, for Thor had actually held the great serpent up to the sky. The old woman Thor wrestled was in fact old age, Eli, Old Norse old age, and there is no one that old age cannot bring down. Utgarda Loki tells Thor that it would be better for both sides if they did not meet again. Upon hearing this, Thor takes hold of his hammer and swings it at Utgarda Loki, but he is gone and so is his castle. Only a wide landscape remains.
Norwegian rune poem.
Loki is mentioned in stanza 13 of the Norwegian rune poem in connection with the younger Futhet Bjarkan rune. According to Bruce Dickens, the reference to Loki's deceit in the poem is doubtless to Loki's responsibility for Baldur's death.
Archaeological record. Snapton stone.
In 1950, a semicircular flat stone featuring a depiction of a mustachioed face was discovered on a beach near Snapton, Denmark. Made of soapstone that originated in Norway or Sweden, the depiction was carved around the year 1000 CE and features a face with a curled moustache and scarred lips. The figure is identified as Loki due to the lips, considered a reference to a tale recorded in Skaldskaparmal where sons of Ivaldi stitch up Loki's lips. The stone is identified as a hearthstone. The nozzle of the bellows would be inserted into the hole in the front of the stone, and the air produced by the bellows pushed flame through the top hole, all the while the bellows were protected from the heat and flame. The stone may point to a connection between Loki and smithing and flames. According to Hans-Jorgen Madsen, the Snapton stone is the most beautifully made hearthstone that is known. The stone is housed and on display at the Moesgaard Museum near Aarhus, Denmark.
Kirkby Stephen stone and Gosforth cross.
A fragmentary late 10th century cross located in Kirkby Stephen, Cumbria, England features a bound figure with horns and a beard. This figure is sometimes theorized as depicting the bound Loki. Discovered in 1870, the stone consists of yellowish-white sandstone, and now sits at the front of the Kirkby Stephen Church. A depiction of a similarly horned and round-shouldered figure was discovered in Gainford, County Durham and is now housed in the Durham Cathedral Library. The mid-11th century Gosforth cross has been interpreted as featuring various figures from Norse mythology and, like the Kirkby Stephen stone, is also located in Cumbria. The bottom portion of the west side of the cross features a depiction of a long-haired female, kneeling figure holding an object above another prostrate, bound figure. Above and to their left is a knotted serpent. This has been interpreted as Sigyn soothing the bound Loki.
Folklore.
The notion of Loki survived into the modern period in the folklore of Scandinavia. In Denmark, Loki appeared as Lok. In Jutland, the phrases Lokslassen Avra, Lok is reaping his oats and Lokkaman driver sign Jeddah, Lokkaman drives his goats are thereby recorded in the beginning of the 20th century, the latter with the variation of simply Lok. In Zealand the name Lok Legemand, Lok the playing man was used. In his study of Loki's appearance in Scandinavian folklore in the modern period, Danish folklorist Axel Ulrich cites numerous examples of natural phenomena explained by way of Lok in popular folk tradition, including rising heat. An example from 1841 reads as follows. And in thy, from the same source. When you look at the horizon in clear weather and sunshine, and the air seems to move in shimmering waves, or like a sheet of water which seems to rise and sink in waves. Ulrich further cites several different types of plants named after Loki. Ulrich detects three major themes in folklore attestations. Loki appeared as an air phenomenon, connected with the home fire, and as a teasing creature of the night. Lokatattu or Lokatattu, Faroese tale, or Thattr, of Loki is a Faroese ballad dating to the late Middle Ages that features the gods Loki, Odin, and Hoenir helping a farmer and a boy escape the wraith of a bet-winning Jotun. The tale notably features Loki as a benevolent god in this story, although his slyness is in evidence as usual.
Theories.
Loki's origins and role in Norse mythology have been much debated by scholars. In 1835, Jacob Grimm was first to produce a major theory about Loki, in which he advanced the notion of Loki as a god of fire. In 1889, Suffolsburg theorized Loki to be a variant of Lucifer of Christian mythology, an element of Bug's larger effort to find a basis of Christianity in Norse mythology. After World War II, four scholarly theories dominated. The first of the four theories is that of Folkstrom, who in 1956 concluded that Loki is a hypostasis of the god Odin. In 1959, Jan de Vries theorized that Loki is a typical example of a trickster figure. In 1961, by way of excluding all non-Scandinavian mythological parallels in her analysis, Anna Berg de Ruth concluded that Loki was originally a spider. Anne Holtzmark, writing in 1962, concluded that no conclusion could be made about Loki. Regarding scholarship on Loki, scholar Gabrielle Terville Peter comments, 1964, that more ink has been spilled on Loki than on any other figure in Norse myth. This, in itself, is enough to show how little scholars agree, and how far we are from understanding him. In her review of scholarly discourse involving Loki, scholar Stephanie von Schneerben, 2000, comments that Loki, the outsider in the Northern Germanic pantheon, confounds not only his fellow deities and chronicler Snorri Sturluson but has occasioned as much quarrel among his interpreters. Hardly a monography, article, or encyclopedic entry does not begin with a reference to Loki as a staggeringly complex, confusing, and ambivalent figure who has been the catalyst of countless unresolved scholarly controversies and has elicited more problems than solutions.
Popular culture.
Loki has been depicted and or is referenced in a variety of media in modern popular culture. During the 19th century, Loki was depicted in a variety of manners, sometimes strongly at odds. According to Stefan Arvidsson, the conception of Loki varied during the 19th century. Sometimes he was presented as a dark-haired Semitic fifth columnist among the Nordic Aesir, but sometimes he was described as a Nordic Prometheus, a heroic bearer of culture. Famously, Loki appears in Richard Wagner's opera cycle Ring of the Nibelungen's Loge, a play on Old Norse Loge fire. He is depicted as an ally of the gods, specifically Wotan's assistant rather than Dunmer's, although he generally dislikes them and thinks of them as greedy, as they refuse to return the Rheingold to its rightful owners. In the conclusion of the first opera Das Rheingold he reveals his hope to turn into fire and destroy Valhalla, and in the final opera Gotterdammerung Valhalla is set alight, destroying the gods. Loki appears as a Marvel Comics supervillain of the same name where he consistently comes into conflict with the superhero Thor, in the Marvel Universe his adopted brother and archenemy. This version of Loki is played by Tom Hiddleston in the movies Thor, 2011, The Avengers, 2012, and Thor, The Dark World, 2013. This is, by far, the most popular modern version of Loki. Loki reappeared in, among other works, in the 1975 fantasy novel 8 Days of Luke by Diana Wynne Jones. He is also a central character in Neil Gaiman's novel American Gods and an important character in a few arcs of Gaiman's comic The Sandman. He also appears in Joanne Harris books Runner Marks, 2007, Runelite, 2011, and The Gospel of Loki. Loki appeared in the movie Son of the Mask, 2005. Alan Cumming stars as the god of mischief, Loki, whom Odin is ordered to find the mask. Loki also appears in the online arena combat game, Smite by Hi-Rez Studios, along with other Norse, Hindu, Mayan, Greek, Egyptian and Chinese deities. In Smite, players can choose to be Loki, who is labeled fighting style as assassin.
Notes.
Simc, 2007 195. Simc, 2007 197. Simc, 2007 166. Larrington, 1998 8. Larrington, 1998 10. Larrington, 1998 11. Larrington, 1998 84-85. Larrington, 1998 85. A.B. Larrington, 1998 86. Larrington, 1998 87. Larrington, 1998 87-88. Larrington, 1998 88-89. Larrington, 1998 89. Larrington, 1998 89-90. Larrington, 1998 90-91. Larrington, 1998 91. Larrington, 1998 91-92. Larrington, 1998 91-93. Larrington, 1998 94. Larrington, 1998 94-95. Larrington, 1998 95. Larrington, 1998 95-96. Larrington, 1998 97. Larrington, 1998 97-98. Larrington, 1998 98. Larrington, 1998 99. A.B. Larrington, 1998 100. Larrington, 1998 101. A.B. Larrington, 1999 151. Larrington, 1999 151-152. A.B. Larrington, 1999 152. Larrington, 1999 152-153. Larrington, 1998 245. Larrington, 1998 258. Larrington, 1998 296. Bellows, 2004 245. Thorpe, 1907 96-97. Fawkes, 1995 21. Fawkes, 1995 26-27. Fawkes, 1995 29. Fawkes, 1995 35. A.B. Fawkes, 1995 36. Fawkes, 1995 37-38. Fawkes, 1995 38-40. Fawkes, 1995 40. Fawkes, 1995 40, 41. Fawkes, 1995 41-42. Fawkes, 1995 42, 44. Fawkes, 1995 44, 45. Fawkes, 1995 45, 46. Dickens, 1915-26. A.B. Dickens, 1915-27. A.B. Madsen, 1990-180. Orchard, 1997-105. Calverley, 1899-218. Orchard, 1997-13. Ulrich, 1909. Hirschfeld, 1889-30, 31. Von Schmorben, 2112-113. Terville Peter, 1964-324. Von Schmorben, 2109. Arvidsson, 2006-154. Winder McConnell, Werner Wunderlich, Frank Gentry, Ulrich Müller 2013. The Nibelungen Tradition, an Encyclopedia Routledge. Entries Loge, and Loki, Arnold, Martin, 2011. Thor, Myth to Marvel. ISBN 9781441135421. Hill, Mark, 2005. Neil Gaiman's American Gods, An Outsider's Critique of American Culture, Thesis. University of New Orleans, Setner Oaktam, Zulaya, 2008. The Sandman as a Neo-Medieval Text. Image Text T, Interdisciplinary Comics Studies 4, 1. Retrieved April 1, 2013, http://joan-harris.co.uk/ v3 site / book / runmark / http://joan-harris.co.uk v3 site / book / runalite / index.html http://joan-harris.co.uk v3 site / book / Loki / index.html Son of the Mask http://www.harrisstudios.com smite / nav / game-info god god-info god = 17 of him that Sigyn collects into a bowl. However, she must empty the bowl when it is full, and the venom that drips in the meantime causes Loki to writhe in pain, thereby causing earthquakes. With the onset of Ragnarok, Loki is foretold to slip free from his bonds and to fight against the gods among the forces of the Jotnar, at which time he will encounter the god Heimdall and the two will slay each other. Loki is referred to in the Poetic Edda, compiled in the 13th century from earlier traditional sources. The Prose Edda and Heimskringla, written in the 13th century by Snorri Sturluson. The Norwegian rune poems, in the poetry of Skalds, and in Scandinavian folklore. Loki may be depicted on the Snapton stone, the Kirkby-Stevens stone, and the Gosforth cross. Loki's origins and role in Norse mythology, which some scholars have described as that of a trickster god, have been much debated by scholars.
Names.
The etymology of the name Loki has yet to be solved. It may be related to Old Norse Luka, meaning close, potentially pointing to Loki's role at Ragnarok. In various poems from the Poetic Edda, stanza 2 of Lokasenna, stanza 41 of Hyndluljóð, and stanza 26 of Ulfsvinsmál, and sections of the Prose Edda, chapter 32 of Gylfaginning, stanza 8 of Horst Long, and stanza 1 of Forstdrapa, Loki is alternately referred to as Loptr, which is generally considered derived from Old Norse lop meaning air, and therefore points to an association with the air. The name Hverdrung, Old Norse Ror is also used in reference to Loki, occurring in names for hell, such as in Ynglingatal, Hverdrungsmere, and in reference to Fina, as in Völuspá.
Attestations. Poetic Edda.
In the Poetic Edda, Loki appears, or is referenced, in the poems Völuspá, Lokasenna, Thrimskvda, Reginsmál, Baldrs Trauma, and Hyndluljóð.
Völuspá.
In stanza 35 of the Poetic Edda poem Völuspá, Volva tells Odin that, among many other things, she sees Sigyn sitting very unhappily with her bound husband, Loki, under a grove of hot springs. In stanza 51, during the events of Ragnarok, Loki appears free from his bonds and is referred to as the brother of Beliais, here transcribed as Beliast. In stanza 54, after consuming Odin and being killed by Odin's son Vidar, Fina is described as Loki's kinsman.
Lokasenna.
The poem Lokasenna, Old Norse Loki's quarrel centers around Loki flirting with other gods. Loki puts forth two stanzas of insults while the receiving figure responds with a single stanza, and then another figure chimes in. The poem begins with a prose introduction detailing that Oegr, a figure associated with the sea, is hosting a feast in his hall for a number of the gods and elves. There, the gods praise Oegr's servers Fimafeng and Eldir. Loki could not bear to hear that, and kills the servant Fimafeng. In response, the gods grab their shields, shrieking at Loki, and chase him out of the hall and to the woods. The gods then return to the hall, and continue drinking. Loki comes out of the woods, and meets Eldir outside of the hall. Loki greets Eldir, and the poem itself begins, with a demand that Eldir tell him what the gods are discussing over their ale inside the hall. Eldir responds that they discuss their weapons and their prowess in war.
Loki.
In Norse mythology, Loki, Loptr, or Hverdrungr is a god or Jotun. Loki is the son of Valborti and Laufey, and the brother of Helblindi and Billies. By the Jotun Angbada, Loki is the father of Hel, the Wolfina, and the world serpent Jormungand. By his wife Sigyn, Loki is the father of Nafi and Ornari. By the stallion Svadilfari, Loki is the mother, giving birth in the form of a mare, to the eight-legged horse Sleipnir. In addition, Loki is referred to as the father of Vali in the Prose Edda. Loki's relation with the gods varies by source. Loki sometimes assists the gods and sometimes causes problems for them. Loki is a shapeshifter, and in separate incidents he appears in the form of a salmon, mare, seal, a fly, and possibly an elderly woman. Loki's positive relations with the gods end with his role in engineering the death of the god Baldr. Loki is eventually bound by the gods with the entrails of one of his sons. In both the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, the goddess Skadi is responsible for placing a serpent above him while he is bound. The serpent drips venom from a ball, and yet no one there has anything friendly to say about Loki. Loki says that he will go into the feast, and that, before the end of the feast, he will induce quarreling among the gods, and mix their mead with malice. Eldir responds that if shouting and fighting you pour out onto the gods, they'll wipe it off on you. Loki then enters the hall, and everyone there falls silent upon noticing him. Breaking the silence, Loki says that, thirsty, he had come to these halls from a long way away to ask the gods for a drink of the famous mead. Calling the gods arrogant, Loki asks why they are unable to speak, and demands that they assign him a seat and a place for him at the feast, or tell him to leave. The Skaldic god Bragi is the first to respond to Loki by telling him that Loki will not have a seat and place assigned to him by the gods at the feast, for the gods know what men they should invite. Loki does not respond to Bragi directly, but instead directs his attention to Odin, and states. Odin then asks his silent son Vidar to sit up, so that Loki, here referred to as the wolf's father, may sit at the feast, and so that he may not speak words of blame to the gods in Oego's hall. Vidar stands and pours a drink for Loki. Prior to drinking